at Facebook. Erin has built an impressive career, and we look forward to her conversation with our president and CEO, Susan Siegel. Susan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Randy. And Erin, it is so exciting to be able to have this conversation with you. There's so few senior women in tech. You can probably count them on one hand, and you are one of them. So I would love to have you tell our audience a little bit how you got started in tech and what do you do every day?
Well, thank you so much, Susan. And I apologize in advance. I have a little cold, but it's always such a privilege to speak with you and especially about women and our journeys. So thank you for having me. In terms of my journey, I'm a lawyer by trade. I've always been inspired by the law's evolution. I remember taking a business law class in college. How do you apply these existing legal doctrines to a changing set of facts and circumstances? And in the 90s, the internet, right, and the uncertainty over how to apply the law to the internet, how do we apply trademark, copyright, contract law in this evolving space? Well, that was ideal for a young associate at the time. And I really just sunk my teeth into trying everything to do with technology law. And then in the late 1990s, there was a big case that I managed for a really important client at the time, Microsoft, around consumer protection, really technology and the law. And because of that case, I really became an expert in data protection. And I sort of just took that and I built a practice, and Facebook became a client. And I'll never forget, I was advising them on the legal team. And a woman, a friend of ours, Marnie Levine, and came to me and said, "Would you ever join us?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Look, talk to Sheryl Sandberg, who is just one of the most amazing and inspiring women around. And she's my age, roughly. And she was talking about my career and the road I'd been on. And she overnighted. It was a great conversation. But what she did, which was really special, is, and I may have told you the story, I think, Susan, she overnighted a poster to me that said, "What would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And at the time, I had three kids. I still have three kids, but at the time, those children were 10, 8, and 6. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm afraid. I have a practice. I have young kids. I should just stay where I am. But she really tapped into something, which is, again, this like I like change and I want to push myself. And so I jumped, and I've been at Facebook now for 10 years. I just celebrated my 10-year Faceversary. And from just me, we now have a team on my public policy team that does what I do, about 120 people, as part of a bigger global public policy team. And I really think, I just think it's that curiosity that's kept me going.
That's amazing. And so are you had professional goals when you went to law school. You had professional goals when you had your own practice at a law firm. And then when you came to Facebook, you had a different set of goals. What excites you today? Or, what are your goals today? Have they changed? Did they evolve? And what excites you most about your current role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think all of us, when we're thinking about what we do, you want to feel energized by it. Are you getting energy from the work, from the people around you? And the good news is that, yes, I still am after 10 years. I mean, listen, last few months have been hard. Facebook has been in the news. Susan and I were talking about that before we joined you all. And it can be demoralizing to see your work like reduced to mischaracterizations and a negative news cycle and sound bites, especially when there's so much nuance and substance behind it and so much good that we're doing. But, I came to this company 10 years ago because the essence of Facebook is to build connections, to build empathy, to connect us from around the world, just like we're being connected now virtually, but like connect, have conversations. And I'm committed to that mission. And so, my career, as I said, has been about pushing, exploring new ideas, new work, and with technology's evolution, it's constantly changing. And so I think for me, the goals, we continue. My job is public policy. My job is to meet the external environment where they are. Legislators, regulators, academics, civil society. They have questions. They have important questions about the work we're doing around data collection. They have important questions about how we're going to build the future. And so, my job continues to be meeting people where they are, explaining what we do, taking their feedback, helping us make sure we're building products that take that feedback into account. And I'm convinced that over time, as we continue to do right, it's like we're going to walk the walk, and that's going to support us when we talk the talk.
So what you said is really interesting. And, as there's more awareness about technology, I mean, you can imagine when you started your career, there was one level of awareness. Today, there's a whole different perspective. Do you feel the bar is being raised on everything you do every day? And is that impacting how you think about what you'll be doing in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the bar, I think, what's being raised is sort of everybody's just norms are evolving. Think about it. When I remember the 90s and we had started online banking, and everyone was, oh my God, how are we going to ever do online banking? And look at us now. We're all doing online banking. So we as people have evolved in what we are comfortable with. Listen, technology evolves with it. Innovation typically is ahead, and it's saying, hey, what do you think about this? I remember there was a big issue when I started at the company. It was about location data, super sensitive. And we have really locked that down. But my kids are now using these apps that aren't our apps. They're not Facebook apps, but where they're sharing location. They have these maps on these different apps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? So it's interesting just that these norms have changed. I do think that with that, the responsibility of companies, of course, has to evolve with it. We have to understand what is acceptable today, and maybe not do certain things that aren't acceptable. Okay, we're good with online banking. Okay, let's see how we can shape that. Okay, wow, the location stuff is in the future, but how can we make sure we're doing that responsibly? So I think that there's a constant set of evolution from people. And I think that regulators, legislators, and others, and companies, we're all trying to figure out the right way to do this to serve people.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that every day we're learning something because in many ways it's just such a new space and a different space and evolving every day with AI and data. And it's just every day is a new and interesting kind of turn of events.
Yeah.
So, you probably are much more used to having worked remotely, digitally.
Yeah.
But for many people, the way we work has changed dramatically over the last 20 months. Has this been your experience? And has that not just been your experience, but has that changed your role a little bit and how you interact with people and your peers and
Yes.
your team?
Yes, all the above. I mean, even though, we've all had virtual meetings, but, for all of us, it's better to be in the room in person. At least before the pandemic, I would fly to California, I'd fly to Europe, I'd fly to be in person. Because if you weren't in person, it just didn't feel like we all were giving as much. I at least felt that I maybe wasn't being heard as well virtually. So even though there was the opportunity, I'd fly in. What I think is interesting now is the norms have changed such that I think that in the future, I'm still remote, but I see people in rooms and how they interact remotely is so much better. So I think this is all good for people like myself who, again, I have these three children. I still don't want to be traveling as much. And so hopefully this will reduce travel. But in terms of the role, of course, we're launching products. I mean, when the pandemic hit, the company built a lot of new technologies like we have a workrooms and we have these rooms now and shops. I don't know if you shops is this need that businesses have. Think about all the small businesses that couldn't reach consumers during the pandemic and they started to go virtual. And so we build products for them to meet their needs. And so we're having to build these products virtually, providing that input, getting feedback. Again, remember, my job is to get feedback, bring that inside. So we're having virtual conversations all the time. And so it changed how we have to do things. I think we're now used to it, but at the beginning it was tough. And there's also been a bunch of new regulations introduced during this time. And so, we've had to, as a leader, I've had to make sure that my team keeps up with this ever expanding scope of work while maintaining balance, health, focus. I mean, so that's been, I think, really an interesting challenge for all of this, for all of us as leaders during this time. And that's been an evolution in certainly my role.
Do you think your team and yourself, do you think you're more productive and more effective remotely? I mean, you're kind of implying that at one level.
I think it depends. I feel that there are folks on the team with young children, men and women, and I remember having young children, and it doesn't matter if you have someone here to help. If I'm home, my kids want to be with me. And so I think it can be difficult. And this is where that balance comes in, is really making sure folks can, so it depends. I kept checking in with people. How are you feeling? How are you doing? How are you managing? So I think it depends. And then, for me, though, my kids, were able to go back to school. They're a little bit older. I have a daughter in college. And so when she went back to school, I was able, they're doing homework too. I'm doing work. I liked it because I was able to kind of hang out with them at the breaks and that kind of thing. So I felt super efficient and effective and impactful.
Mhm.
But I think it depends on maybe the stage and maybe the type of work. We've had hardware folks who have to go in. They have to go in. My mother, just as a quick anecdote, she works at the Pentagon. She's a defense intelligence analyst. She's 80 years old, by the way, still working. Why? Because she wants to make sure that women are still working and have that space to continue working. But she went in every day because she couldn't take the work home with her. So I think it depends on the work we're doing, in terms of whether it works or not remotely.
Yeah, for me, it was amazing because my children are grown up. And
Right.
at what point in your life will you have grown-up children living with you for months at a time? And they
That's
did. And
blessing.
it was such a beautiful moment that may
Yes.
never happen again, but it was great. So do you think that there are clearly different challenges leading your team remotely, but there are also benefits? What did you think the biggest challenge was in terms of leading your team remotely? And going one step further, how do you keep them inspired? I mean, you're inspirational, but how do you keep them inspired and motivated and going every single day?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll start by saying I don't have all the answers, but I can share what I've learned. I mean, and one of the things so interesting for me is half of our team started post-COVID. So, this has been a really interesting challenge for me because I am a personable, check in, stop by people's desks, face-to-face person. So I had to really adjust. And so one of the challenges was, how do I bring this team to have that same feeling, the same, cultural sense of connection? I want, for me, I've always wanted to feel connected to the people around me, to really feel connected to the work. And so one of the things I did early on, and I think was important for me, was to show my own vulnerability. During this time, think about it. We had the events of when George Floyd was killed. We had not just in the events of people when they were really sick, and there were family members and people on my teams who passed away because of COVID. And so I think for me, one of the challenges, but one of the opportunities was creating a safe space for folks to really share and to show my own vulnerability. When the video came out, George Floyd, I have a team meeting every other week. I cried. It hit me hard, and I showed that in front of people. We discussed it in our team meeting, and I think by opening up, expressing how moments affected me, it then gave my team members space to communicate their own feelings, and hopefully has given us all a chance to realize that we're not unique or alone in how we're feeling. And so it's been so many hard things about it and having to adjust, but I think also I feel like I've grown as a leader during this time because of it.
And how did you relate to the people that you work for during this period? Do
Yeah.
you feel like you had the right kind of communication? Because I know there a lot of young women out there that say, well, maybe I have great, experience with my direct boss, or maybe I have great experience with my peers, but have you been able to work with your bosses during this period and communicate the same way?
Yes, and in fact, what's been interesting is because we're virtual, and this is a function of me not always being in California. I live in DC, but now we're having virtual meetings almost every day. So I am actually seeing folks virtually a lot more than maybe my, once every 3 weeks meeting in person. So um, I do think that everybody across Facebook, the company, took this very seriously of how do we create moments that feel organic and authentic, even though we're not in person. So we, at Facebook writ large, we have micro kitchens where people stop by and see each other. So it wouldn't just be me that I would have these micro kitchen sessions, but it'd be other leaders at the company, bosses and bosses, of others. And so we would get together. We also have a women's leadership group at Facebook that I'm part of. And so we would just up the number of times we would get together virtually just to share and talk. And these are people who I may not see all the time when I go to California, but now I'm seeing more frequently because we're setting things up virtually. So it's almost like the leaders of the company, we set things up more to connect in some ways than we had before. And so there were some opportunities created that were different. And that includes my boss's, boss. Essentially, we all were seeing each other in some ways more often. And it was really interesting and nice. It still is.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I mean, you have to reach out and make sure you're reaching the team in a virtual world. So you have to set up more formal ways to communicate, not formal, but times, et cetera. So, so as you look, a lot of young women today say, I want to go into tech, or I want to be an entrepreneur, and what advice would you give, especially to young women looking to build a successful career in tech? And what do you wish you had known at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that at the beginning of the career, when I was pushing towards tech, I thought to myself, I'm not a computer scientist, so maybe I can't do this. And I would say that's not true. I would say if you have a love of learning and then go for it. Don't let fear hold you back, right? It's that same advice Cheryl gave me. Don't let fear hold you back. And I think just trying new things, always pushing yourself. I was getting comfortable. I was a little afraid when, I have these young kids. That can be hard. Do I really want to start a new career at a new company, and have to build all that back up? So that was an important move for me. I also think, careers are a jungle gym. So I would say sometimes you might need to slow down when the kids are young and then go up. I mean, like as kids get older. And so I think that's really important. And I think don't undervalue the soft skills like empathy and intuition. If those are your strengths, I think now in a virtual environment, and that's the future, that's where we're all people with those skills are the ones who I think are going to succeed. So harness those.
So have you had special challenges being a woman as you come up in your career?
As I've come up in my career, yeah, for sure. I remember, this is more at the law firm where I was previously to where I am today, but I remember coming up and I think often people want to be around and often give the work to people who look and sound like them. And women, we don't necessarily look and sound like the majority, at least for me at the time at the law firm, there were mainly men and they would do men things. And then the work would all of a sudden be doled out to men. And so I do think I had to really, and here I was building a practice at the same time, a practice that at the time people were like, what is this technology practice? So I was pushing for things. And I often was worried, people are going to view me as, those words that we hate as women, aggressive and pushy and those bossy. But I think it's just really having I had this mother, who's been an amazing role model, who's worked in the military, for gosh sakes, with military men. And so she's always telling me, stick to it, stick to your guns, don't let fear hold you back, believe in what you do, keep going. So you just got to kind of somehow, you got to drown out that noise. It's there and it's hard. And I've faced it. But yeah, you just got to keep going. If you're creative, if you're thoughtful, if you're hardworking, at the end of the day, you're going to succeed.
If you could have changed one thing that you did in your career, what would that be?
If I could change one thing I did in my career, I mean, I wonder if I was at the law firm for 15 years. I think because I was a little bit sitting back, I might have gone to a company earlier. I love working in-house. I think it's been just being part of a team and being part of the strategic development of products. It's just something you can do so well inside. I loved also, counseling and being a consultant as a lawyer, outside counsel, but um, I might have gone a little earlier inside. I didn't jump into to the law firm until I was, yeah, I'm 52, so 42.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So,
what it's worth.
yeah, no, I think that's really important because in a sense, you're empowering young women to say, don't be afraid.
That's
Go
right.
earlier. Go
That's
with
right.
something you love and you want to do,
That's right. That's right.
and then you'll be successful. I think that's a big piece of your message. So
That's
can I
it.
ask you a question? What message do you give your daughters?
Yeah. So I have a daughter and two sons, and I give her the same message, that same message that my mom gave me. My mom it's all about the grit. It's all about the hard work. It's focusing there on the work. It's all about, and I've tried as a mom too, it's not about the grades or the outcome, but like, how's the work? How'd you feel about the work you put into it? Are you feeling good about the effort? And so I think it's that same, just keep doing. And the other thing I do is I do the try new things piece. She thought she wanted to do one thing, and I said, okay, well, why don't you try some other things before you commit too early? Because I also think you can commit. That's one of the things I'm really grateful I did as a young attorney is I didn't just fall into one thing. I pushed myself to really stretch and make sure that was the right thing. And so I think when you're young, I really want her to get exposure to lots of different types of subjects before she commits. And so it's those two pieces.
And you tell your son the same thing?
I tell my boys the exact same thing I tell my daughter largely. And then sometimes I'll tell them just to be really always, I'll tell them when they go out to a party, ask because they're younger. They're 15 and 17. I'll say, just ask a girl, a girl how she's doing. Check in with the girls around you. I think it's hard to be a teenage girl these days. I just feel it when I think about if I had to sort of, back in the day, we didn't have all the devices where we knew where everyone was and we were being
I had a telephone, and that was about it.
Exactly. I mean, this is tough. So just check in with the girls around you and always be respectful. So that's an additional message for the boys.
That's great. So we have time for one more question. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 10th anniversary of Women's Hemispheric Network, obviously.
Yep.
So tell us, what advancements, what would you like to see the advancement path for women to be over the next 10 years? Where in your ideal world, where will women have progressed professionally over the next 10 years that we're not today?
So I really believe that women, and I'm hoping that organizations, we need to think about women's careers as long, and we need to be intentional about development and growth. And so I often felt that, at the law firm, for example, it's like these certain deadlines of 8 years, you become partner, then this and this. And I'm like, well, why? Why does it have to be on in that structure? So I just want us to be more intentional and work towards thinking about careers as longer and think about developing women and very intentional about development and growth. At Facebook, we work to really provide a consistent bar for people in similar roles and levels across the company, but it's not based on, oh, it's been 2 years, it's been 4 years, you've got to do it this way. It's really, because often I feel like women feel pressure, and the pressure often comes when the kids are young, and it's just like, take some heat off that. Don't leave the workforce, stay in it. Careers are long. Let's figure out an opportunity for you now that can still enable you to develop. And then later, when your kid's a little bit older, if you want to take that other path, this idea that we have to step out and step in is, I find a little bit difficult. I also think, we're doing that a lot through performance reviews and promotions. We do a lot of conversations about reviews around development and how we can really think about careers in a longer way. And so I think that's for me is my biggest thing. I just remember as a woman coming up, the pressure to sort of do things by a certain time and a certain point and a certain age. It just feels so artificial. And I think we can do better by women.
Well, I think our time is up. My team keeps me very disciplined.
Okay.
I want to thank you, Erin. This has been a great conversation. I look forward to continuing it. And while I
Yes.
love virtual, I look forward to meeting you in person.
I know. I look forward to it too. Thank you so much, Susan. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. It's really been fun. Good luck and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin and Susan, for a great conversation. What a wonderful way to kick off our 10th annual conference. We continue with a panel conversation, Building Better Tables, How to Include More Women in Traditionally Male Spaces, featuring Gaby Gallardo, General Manager, Public Sector at Microsoft Latin America, Ricardo Mora, Co-Head of Latin America and Head of America's Global Currencies and Emerging Market Sales at Goldman Sachs, Maria Moret, Vice President, Southern Latin America at Metronic, and our moderator, Laura Zelenko, Senior Executive Editor for Talent, Diversity, Training, and Standards at Bloomberg. Tweet your questions during the conversation using the hashtag WomenASCOA. Laura, the floor is yours. And I think I jumped the gun. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, hello.
We're configuring something and we will be back with you momentarily. Apologies, but we had to have the tech gremlins with us here today. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a virtual conference, would it be?
No problem. We wait.
Thank you very much for your patience. We're all looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And she's down the street. Actually, we got a message that there was a spectrum outage coming. ever before, barriers to gender parity still exist in STEM, finance, and the healthcare industries. Why is it important to invest in female talent? And Gabi, we'll start with you.
Okay. Let's start right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So sorry, I was waiting. What is important? Well, maybe I would like to change a little bit the question. I believe that we need to invest in a group or a team of diverse talent professionals because every company designs products and solutions for everyone, and those everyone are each of them unique. So it is, from my point of view, something besides women. We need to listen and include as many perspectives as possible. But it is not easy, as we have our bias, and we need to recognize them, to skip it, and to solve it. Let me put an example. I'm managing an ERG, I'm leading an ERG group in Microsoft, and we are 4 women plus 1 man in the main committee. And one of the women proposed me a new member, saying, it is a woman, let's put her as part of the committee. And I pushed back there because we will be 5 women plus 1 man. So the good thing is we don't think alike, and we need men's perspective also. But in a short answer, different perspectives helps us all to achieve more. So I believe that is the key to have women in and men in any forum.
Maria, what is your point of view?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Gabi, you're in a prison protection program. We can't see you very well, but we can hear you. So that's the important thing. So
I will try to manage.
Maria, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I think that we need to invest in women because as it's important because women have an unique contribution, make a unique opportunity in the business world. Okay, just for me, for example, in Metronic, we have a strategy to be a leader in diverse and inclusive in the healthcare world. Okay, to do this, we work in 3 pillars. One, an individuals. The second one is the company, and the third one is the community. Individuals, why? Because we need to be accountable, okay, role models. In the company, because we are including diversity and inclusion as a strategy, business strategy. And in the community, because we are thinking into move with our strategy in the community. You know that to have more diverse team, including women, have a real impact in business result. I'm engineer and I love the numbers, I love the statistics and so on. And you know that the different research says that the companies that has more diversity are 20% more innovative, okay? Just in the hiring process, more than 70% of people that are in the process think that diversity is so important when you decide to accept or not a job offer. In Metronic, we invest in women, and I give you some information about numbers, okay? 50% of workforce in Metronic at global level are women, okay? The past year, the new hiring people were 50% too. In our management team at global level, we have 40% women, and our target in 4 years will be 45. But in Latin America, we already achieved this number, and in Southern Latam, who is the region that I lead, we have 47% of women in management team. with this, I think that we invest in women.
That's extraordinary. That's really
Yeah.
extraordinary. And it's extraordinary that you know all of the numbers, because measuring is so important, and everybody knows what the numbers are. Ricardo, as the sole male on this panel, why is it important to invest in female talent?
Well, thank you again for having me today, and it's great to hear the perspectives. I agree. It's you can answer this question in numerous ways, but I think it's been said, which is the diversity of opinions is super important. And it's we work in a commercial business, and it's commercial to have women work with you. And like the first woman that senior woman I interacted with was was Susan Siegel, who's here today. She was my boss way back when, and she was a groundbreaker for Wall Street at that time. And so and I saw how she led the teams. And if I play the tape in terms of how it is from here at Goldman, and people that work for me, and people that I work for, I've worked for women, I have women that work for me, and it's a combination of what's been said. So I don't want to repeat it, but it's different perspectives, it's different ideas. It's very unique. Maybe it's because I have three sisters, and I'm the only boy in my family. I saw it firsthand from growing up. But women can multitask. They can do. There's a richness to the experience of the overall group when you have a combination of women and men in on the decision table making. And again, going back to the commercial aspect of what we do, when you're pushing something forward, if it's just one opinion, and it's just one type of singular way of looking at things, you can get groupthink in the wrong way. And I think that when you have women that are involved and sitting at the table as decision makers, to be clear, then and people that work for me are that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Then you get that perspective. And I go back to, again, to be succinct in terms of points, the ability to multitask, the ability to bring decisions quickly, the ability to be at the table and really work well with others. I found that, and again, from my experience and the way I grew up, I find that to be just a very natural way to lead teams and to be part of teams, is when you have women there alongside you, equal in your decision process.
So this is a question for the three of you. And now that we're going through what we're now calling the Great Resignation, that we have huge numbers of young women and old women, everybody dropping out of the workforce. What strategies are you using to retain top female talent and to retain young female talent? We'll start with you, Ricardo.
So I would say, I guess I bifurcated first answer, absence of the COVID-19, and just think of it just from the terms of strategies to retain female talent. So one is, because I would say the second part of the answer would apply to both, but to both genders. But what I would say is this: it's important that women feel empowered and that they have a visible path to leadership. And I think it's important that they're promoted within networks, and that meaning that if you take a look at how do people interact, whether, let's just take gender aside, when people, what makes people feel empowered to one, be retained at the organization, to feel like they have growth, to feel like they have a path forward, to feel like they don't have to call someone else for a job. And what the way you do that is you have to, in some cases, in the way I used to think was that you treated everyone equal. And I think that there is some of that. But I think that you have to make a special effort if you want to retain a certain population to ensure that they feel empowered. And so when it comes to the people that work for me, that it's important they have that. And I go back to my initial comment about a path to leadership, is they have to feel that they have sponsorship and they have mentorship. And those are very different concepts. So one is where you give them advice, like you and I were speaking earlier, and you can kind of guide them around and show them different things. But the other is unique to every organization, which is sponsorship, where senior leaders feel that they have an obligation to ensure that this female talent, is somehow being pushed through the system, and that they're given opportunities. And so when you put all of that together, to retain female talent, they have to not only be part of it, but they have to feel it, and that they feel like they're being promoted and that they're being visibly seen within the organization. And then the last thing I'd say about the COVID-19 in this environment is that I think it applies to everybody, is that you have to have flexibility. It's something that I myself, who has always been in the office Monday through Friday, and none of us could think, right, that we could do what we do from home. That you have, and I don't know what it's going to look like in the forward basis, but we have to at least have the ability to be open, to be flexible. And I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but that we should make sure that people understand that there is flexibility. And I think that's super important, particularly when there's families and children and et cetera, that we all know that that's the way the organization is thinking.
Flexibility is so important, and even my dog keeps me centered. He makes me make sure that I walk him in the morning and when I come home at night. Gabi, how about you? What strategies do you use to retain top female talent?
First of all, I ask them to be vocal of what they want, what they need, and it is all regarding the power they need to have, or we need to give to them. And with that, have the time to talk, to have the conversation, the right conversations. And the company is giving all the flexibility that we need. So it is easy, that part. Maybe the tough part is to understand the needs of each one of them. So I understand that with the coaching, with the one-on-one conversations, we can have those needs be told, and with that we can manage. At Microsoft, we are saying that we are not retaining people. We are preparing the space just to everyone to feel safe, comfortable with the path, with the career, not with the job, with the career. And with that, people choose to stay. And we are doing our best to have our women in more leadership spaces where the opportunity happens.
Safety is super important, knowing that you're in a safe environment, not only physically, but also psychologically, knowing that you can speak up and your opinions will be heard and respected. Maria, how about you from Buenos Aires? Share. You have
Well, it has to be, sorry?
Sorry, you have so many professional women in Argentina. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yes, in Argentina, in Latin America, in different countries, yes. It's hard to say something different from like Ricardo and Gabi says, no? But just to add the point of view as Metronic, no? The first one that I want to share with you is we are in Metronic all accountable, okay, for diversity, inclusion, and innovation. And how I try to say with this, we have in different countries, in different business unit or functional units, different action plans to achieve a good score in terms of diversity, inclusion, and innovation, okay? And we have a survey each 6 months to measure this. And this is talking about diversity. In terms of the other thing is programs, as Ricardo mentioned, a mentoring program, okay? We have a huge structure in terms of to bring to our women, just only not to be a mentor, but also to be a mentee, okay? And at the end, I think that is good to have policies, okay, about women. Policies like equal job opportunities, safe environment. We have also training about unconscious bias, led by Neuro Institute leadership. Why? Because it's important that all of us work about or talk about bias. And just to finish, says that in Metronic we have a different network. One of the largest or the biggest is Metronic Women Network, with more than 19,000 members. across the world in 76 countries. And the idea of this is involve, okay, the women, involving the development careers, do different initiatives for them, just work with women in the STEM careers, participating in different universities. And I think that is a very good opportunity to participate and be more engaged with women. You are in mute, I think.
Of course I'm on mute. I had to do that and I didn't do it on purpose. Sorry. How can we create more inclusive and equitable work environments as we emerge from the COVID crisis? You all are doing a lot of things, but what else can we be doing? Maria, go first. Now you're on mute. Tag, you're it.
Sorry. First of all, I think that we need to put the elephant in the room, okay? And just be aware that we have some situation and we need to do something to change this, no? And policies, I think that is the first one that we need to work. And the other thing is to develop different programs. We have programs like Career 2.0 from different participants that help to come back, okay, to the work, okay, because they stayed for some years out. And I think that we need to be working flexible model, okay, to consider the situation, COVID situation. The COVID changed our mind. We need to adapt. We need to be flexible, and we need to have in consideration all the requirements of our employee. Okay, this is my thought.
Ricardo, how about you?
So I think I jumped the gun a little bit on the previous question in answering this, in the sense that, and I think Maria said it well, which is that the flexibility, we don't know what's going to happen on a forward basis. But I can say at Goldman what we've done is we've asked people to come back. We're about, at least on the trading and sales side, we're about 80% back now on our floor. I look across our floor now and it's completely full. Fridays it diminishes quite a bit, but in terms of ensuring, and I think it's a competitive issue, right? So I'm on the board of my university, and it baffled me when they were saying about how, and it's different there. It's in California, in the Bay Area, and they were saying how the commute time is 2 hours each way for most of these people in the Bay Area, and so to remain competitive in terms, and with the employers that are there, they had to promote flexibility in the work environment. Completely understand that, and I think and that for them it works. And I think it all depends on per organization. Certain organizations, you need the convening power of people being together, apprenticeship, being able to have role models, being able to physically be with someone to be able to learn, being able to knock on the office. I think those are important attributes to, at least to the business that I'm in. That said, you don't have to be here all the time. And I think that, if you have to walk your dog, or if you have to, be at a parent-teacher conference, I think you have to do what you have to do. And I think that as long as your heart and soul is in what we do as a living, in addition to your family, et cetera, and it's one of the important tenets of how you go about your conducting your life, then I think that it's very clear that where people are, and the people that work for me, I'm lucky to have really good people that work for me, very lucky, and they work really hard, and they're not always here. They're doing things, but they're here in the way that they need to be here, which is they're pushing things forward and things are getting done, but I don't have to physically see them.
That's great. And trust is so important. You trust that they're doing what they have to be doing. Gabi, how about you? How can we create more inclusive and equitable work environments as we emerge from the COVID crisis?
I don't want to repeat it is plus one to Ricardo's comment and Maria, but I could say that, again, flexibility is what we learn from this situation what we globally live. So my understanding is that, and I'm saying this before of the COVID work, we are one person. We are not a professional life and a personal life. We are one life. And with the flexibility we have in our days, at least in the organizations where I've been lucky to be part of, the flexibility was every day. So if I had to attend a call during maybe my time at home, I have no problem. Although during these days it is time at home all the time. But that flexibility is mixing, is forcing the conversation between the private life and the professional life. So for me, I understand it is an acceleration of something that would happen, at least in a technological company where we are managing, or I'm managing a region, and in the past I was managing another region. I've been mostly remote with my team. So what you need to understand and to learn is how to encourage people to be motivated being remote. And well, at Microsoft, what we are doing for flexibility and for the next steps or our next life in the new world is we are open the offices. People is not obliged to go. They could choose to stay at home or where they could do their job. And if they need another space, they could do the checks that our rules are asking, vaccination or giving some kind of signs that there's no issue with the health and you can go into the office and book the time to be there. Because we need to understand also that there are people that have difficulties to work at home because of the lack of private space or kids around all the time, demanding to be mom and dad with them. So that's the other thing that we need to understand. It is not bad to listen a dog barking or a kid crying when you have a meeting. And it is a learning, and we are all in the same page with that.
Bloomberg isn't here. They had connection issues. And yesterday they were interviewing somebody in Germany, and the poor fellow was so frustrated because he had his son walking back and forth with the headphones on, and it was adorable. But I'm wondering how the man reacted when the camera went off. So this program is a lot about telling stories and inspiring. And I would like you to share a story of somebody, a woman who has mentored you, or somebody that you have mentored and allowed this person or helped this person to feel more comfortable and be more successful in a traditionally male space. And so I'm going to ask for a volunteer who wants to be the first to answer this question. Tell us a little story about a person or yourself, somebody that mentored you, that helped you get to where you are.
I can start if you want.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Gabi.
I will talk about someone that mentored me, and the name, she's Monica. That is the name of her. I'm not going to reveal all the data, but if she's connected, she will know. She was the director of a company where I've been working 25 years ago. And she was the one that helped me understand that I need to be vocal. I need to be vocal. And maybe I'm saying something that later we can advise to the young women in technology. To be vocal, to tell what I want. And I'm talking about 25 years ago. So that was like a lot, because today it's like, I don't know, I don't want to say it is something by default that it is happening, but it is happening. But 25 years ago, it was different. It was in a financial company, so they were male dominated, and she was one of the leaders in that company. And I really admired her. And she gave me that kind of suggestions, because she was not my mentor formally, but I adopted her as my mentor. And she was the one that also was saying, hey, sometimes we need to be the one that needs to take the tough decisions. And I could not imagine that. But at the end, I've been taking sometimes the tough decisions, and I'm the one that empower every woman that touch my day by day to be vocal. I don't believe in the career plans that we need to write the career plan. Because in our world, the roles are changing all the time. So you cannot say, hey, I want to be the, I don't know what role in the near future. It is better to let them know that you need to know what are the aspirations in terms of the path of the career, but not the role, the next role. So maybe it is a good space to say thank you to her, and to admire her forever. She's not working anymore; she's retired. But really, she was a person that marked my I want to say professional life now.
Thank you to Monica then. And
Yes.
as Erin said before, careers are like a jungle gym. And I remember somebody who gave a keynote at one of our conferences a few years ago who also used that thesis, careers are like a jungle gym. Who's our next volunteer?
So I'll give it a shot, Randy.
Thank you, Ricardo.
So I'll answer this in two ways. So one is what my mom told me. I don't know when, but she told me this in the six, is that when you're conducting yourself, and it doesn't just apply to business or it's just your life. You do something and you just do the right thing, and you do something with someone, and you treat that person in a certain way, but you don't expect that person to then give that directly back to you. Somehow it'll come back to you in some way, not necessarily one for one, but you just have to put it out there and do the right thing, and the right thing will happen to you. So that's one. Two is that is one where my mentor here at the firm, he's actually our CFO, who told me a long time ago when he was running Latin America, and he said you have to remember something, that because I'm the kind of person that by nature I don't, self promotion is not something that many of us, doesn't come naturally, and when you work at a big firm, bureaucracy, a lot of people do that. And so what he said was, you have to find the right way to make sure that people know what you're doing and do it in your own way. And so you have to somehow find that balance of, don't assume that your boss or your boss's boss knows exactly what you're doing, because they won't know. They may or they may not know. It just depends, right? And so you can't just go and say, hey, look at me, I'm in the office today, or hey, look at, I just did this, or I just did this big deal, or whatever it may be, because then it's not exactly the most appropriate way of promoting yourself. But you can, in the right way, ensure that people know what you're doing, and ensure that in those discussions that you're soliciting advice, and that you're saying your opinions, and just be present, and not just be someone who comes in maybe getting the job done in a very, very good way, and in an excellent way, but somehow it's just not out there that what you're doing. So just ensure that that the word isn't promotion, but that somehow you are investing in not just in your commerce or what you're doing and getting that part done, but that there's some aspect of of acknowledgement and people know what you're doing within the organization. Otherwise, you can get lost in very large bureaucracies where other people naturally will be saying, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. And you know, you don't want to be that type of person, but you do want to be someone who's acknowledged.
So Ricardo, how did you do that? Because I think this is such valuable advice.
Well, at least for me, the way and the advice I've given to people who work for me is, and I have no problem doing this, is that, or saying this, is that you should know your boss's boss. So you should know your boss, you should know your boss's boss. And not in a threatening way to your boss, but, and I tell people who work for me, go post Mark, go post a show, go and let them do that and go direct. Because then what happens is that it goes back to the initial comments I said before. They get that visibility. They get that ability that they're seen. And so one is like the posting culture, which is done in the right way. But the other part, just to kind of answer your question, is that it's got to be done in again, the business that I'm in is commercial or transactions or relationships, focusing on clients, problems. You have to, like, the discussion has to be about problem solving, and not necessarily I just did this, but about, hey, we're working on this. This is the way I think of it, or I want to make sure you know this. And you know, it's got to be in that type of discourse and type of discussion, because then it's very natural. And I think also, at least when I speak to people that I work for, and then I tell people who work for me, don't come in here. I tell people, don't feel like you have to set up an appointment 2 weeks from now, 2:45 to 3 o'clock, and we can only, if you need to speak to someone, speak to someone. So make whatever interaction you have with the people that you work for a natural one. And it doesn't have to be like by appointment. Hopefully the people that you work for are not so prescriptive. But that it's got to be like you have to feel comfortable in your own skin, and to be able to just say, hey, this is what's going on. And it could be good, it could be bad. And so that's the way I would answer that.
It's always so scary to deliver bad news, but oftentimes you build a better relationship that way. Maria, over to you. Share something with us.
Okay, I like the story. I'm thinking, and I say that I have two mentors in my professional life. One, 20 years ago, okay, I have a boss that just worked with me in terms of authenticity, in terms of take care about your team, stop when you have a lot of problems to resolve. And we work a lot on it, no? Because I have a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and sometimes you need to be quiet, stop, think, and so on. And he helped me a lot in this journey. And the other one is when I took this responsibility as vice president, you see the other vice president, the majority are men, okay? And just to say and think, what kind of leader do you want to be? Okay. And I have this in my mind because it's so important to be authentic. You are a woman, you need to put your perspective, your way and over the table, okay? But never forget what kind of leader do you want to be. And for me, this was a key.
What kind of leader are you? Describe yourself.
I want to be a leader that the people remember me like someone that helped in their careers to grow, give opportunities, just listen, or I love that the people go to the company and smile and feel good and make a team, because I think that if you are have focus, okay, in your team, you'll be successful. For this reason, just remember, as a leader and not as a boss.
That's right. That's great. Thank you, all of you, for answering that question. And I remember several years ago, I was shopping in a dressing room in New York City, and the phone rings, and it's somebody who had worked with me in banking years earlier, said, I need to speak to you because I have a job offer to change careers and I want your advice. And I thought, wow, the fact that you would call me after so many years because you value my advice was really heartwarming. And now I'm also a mentor to his wife, who is a partner in a law firm in Panama. So this is really extraordinary, especially since I never got married and I didn't have children. So I have lots of people that I've mentored along the way. Are there any opportunities for women that you see today that weren't there 2 years ago? Who wants to go first? Maria, you go first.
I think yes, because you know that all the people are talking about diversity and inclusive, and I think that different companies are taking plans, okay, to be more diverse and give opportunities to women. In Metronic, we have, as I mentioned, one program that is Career 2.0, okay, because what we see that the people manager is 3 times less likely to receive a summary or curriculum vitae, okay, for people that stay or have a gap in their professional career. And this program help to this participant and give the opportunity to return to the professional life and refresh the technical skills, have a networking with another professional healthcare, and this is program for 6 months and pay return. This is one of the things. And the other is the focus on, is I mentioned, networking, no? Networking for women, for people that are starting in the careers. And the other thing, I think that we have more opportunities for women that in some areas, for example, technical service or IT, that in the past we have 0 women, okay, in this department. And we are working in different policies to have more people there and have more opportunities, of course. You are in mute, but I assume that you said Ricardo. You go.
I did say Ricardo. Maria, you're great. You're a lip reader.
Maria can read lips, yes. So I would say a couple of things. One is in terms of your question about opportunities. One is and it was mentioned by both Gabby and Maria earlier, is we look at metrics very carefully at Goldman, and we get judged and we get measured, and metrics are super important. And so we looked at our metrics for women, and so an area that we can quickly change is our internship programs and the entry point for women into Goldman as analysts. And so we've made a focus to bring women into the firm. And so now we're roughly for the last 3 years at over 50% women coming into the firm as analysts. So that's one where I think it's been the big delta change on the younger ranks to get women in. And so that's a focus which I think was not as prevalent as before. The other is again from the Goldman perspective and the business I'm in, is trading. So we have a very prescriptive, to use that word again, focus on women in trading. And so in the past, to give some some background in terms of how women would come in, they generally would go into sales, the men would go into trading. There'd be a combination of men and women in sales, but there were very few. It's evolved now where it's equally as attractive for women in terms of opportunities because they see other women in trading, and then there's an outreach from women traders and men traders to ensure that we're bringing in women in trading. So I think that's, to answer your question, Randy, I would say that those are the 2 areas that are different now, and it's great because you look across the floor. I'm looking across my floor, and it's well represented by women. and then of course in both the silos of all the different businesses, including trading, which didn't exist as prevalent as it does now.
That's right. And the head of our office in Miami told me this week that her daughter got an internship at Goldman. She's a sophomore and she's absolutely thrilled. And given that I was a banker for many years, I'm happy that young women are also going into banking. But Gabi, over to you. Technology. Tell us, what opportunities do you see for women today that weren't there 2 years ago?
I believe that the change in the trend of the opportunity for women in technology changed 10 years ago. Although in the last 2 years or 3 years, it accelerated a lot. I usually talk about my life in 3 seasons, like seasons of 10 years, like a movie. And this last season, I don't know if it is the last, I mean, the third season is where the women empowered to have technology roles or tech roles in the technology industry. At Microsoft, we have been adding a lot of women in technical side during the last 2 years. There's a kind of a different welcome from the men that are managing those areas to attract more women, and some women that are doing the next step of managing or leading some of the groups in the technical space. I really believe that there's a lot of new opportunities also in sales. And if we compare sales with IT opportunities, there are more opportunities in sales, but just because every company has a sales department, not because it is better to be in sales than in IT. But in the near future, as because of ladies are coding, and they were not doing that in the past, and now it is like fashion, but fashion in a good mood. I mean, it is cool to be coding, and it is perfect because there are a lot of ladies, girls that are learning to code just looking videos, not having the technical expertise through a university or a program that teach them how to code. So I believe that this is an open space, and we're gonna see much more girls in tech in the next 2 years than never before.
That's great. Sales, super important. And oftentimes we have this vision in our heads that you have to be a super hard driving salesman or saleswoman, but everybody has their own style and everybody can be persuasive and everybody can show value. Thank you very much. So what advice would you give a young woman working in a male-dominated workplace? Gabi, start with you.
Okay, maybe short phrases here. The advice is what I mentioned before that my mentor gave to me because of my experience, it worked. Be vocal with your manager and the manager of your manager, as was saying Ricardo, boss of your boss. So be vocal. Let them know what you want to do, your aspirations, your passion. Let them know it because it will help you to find the next opportunity. There's no magic here. If you don't know, they could assume, if they don't know, they could assume, and maybe it is not what your really interest is. And magic happens when, so you need to be patient and be ready for the magic to happen when the organization has the need, there's a new space open, you have the skills, and you are willing to go for it. And someone knows that you want it. When that things happen at the same time, that is magic. This is the magic moment.
Networking, in other words, networking, right? And telling your story.
Yeah.
Ricardo, how about you? What advice would you give a young woman working in a male-dominated workplace?
What I would say, I'd say the following, and this is just factual. So when I go into a meeting and I'm, a group of people are speaking, or different people giving their opinions, many times you find that the youngest person in the room, male or female, a lot of is giving you the best advice or giving you what's really going on. Why? Because they're doing the hard work. Because they're the ones who are deep in terms of what's happening with a particular issue and doing the work maybe for others, so they're pushing it up. And so, as a young woman who's doing that work, who's deep in content, you should express yourself and recognize that the people that are perhaps more senior in the room have that mindset that it doesn't matter if you're a partner, an MD, a VP, an analyst, associate, whoever has an opinion and has content and has something that is valuable in whatever that piece of discussion is about will be heard. And so you should just know your voice is going to be heard. And I think that's to me an opportunity for young women.
Thank you. It's so important to give everybody, and particularly the young people at the table, the opportunity to speak. We heard in Mexico years ago, a woman who came from a male-dominated industry. She said she was in these meetings with men and they wouldn't listen to her, and she kept trying to speak, and she's very, very boisterous and flamboyant. And finally, she was so tired, she just raised her leg and they all shut up. And from then on, they allowed her to speak. Maria, how about you? What would you share?
Well, I talk about my experience, and my first advice is relax, okay? Because in my more than 20 years in my experience, work with men is so good. They are simple, more than we can think, no? Less complex, and just for me, not put in one situation saying, okay, I need to receive another kind of treatment because I'm a woman, okay? No, just only hard work, be bold, as Gabby mentioned. I think that if you are doing the right job and show to the others what do you do, what is the quality of your job, I think that is your you are building your image, no? And the other thing is exposure, networking, participate in different projects at global, local level, participate in another kind of program, as we mentioned, mentoring or the rest, and just embrace the diversity, okay? Just put your thought on the table, be bold, be yourself. This is my advice.
Super important to be yourself. Last question. What advice would you give to managers looking to better support the women on their team? And the companies that you work with seem to be doing a great job. So what advice would you give people who work for companies that don't have the same ethic as diversity and inclusion? What advice would you give to them? I'm sure you know some. Maria, you can start.
Okay, I'm thinking that advice to manager. I think that you need to create a psychologically safe environment. Team, you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and to do this, I think that first you need to be or have effective collaboration, one to the other. The second one, I think that we need to be humility. I'm participating in an executive program presence and was amazing. And one of the things that we talk is about humility, okay? Just admit a mistake, involve the others, create a space to share different opinions. But one of the most important things is visible commitment. Why? Because a lot of managers talk about diversity and inclusion, but they don't feel, okay? Just work, read about it, involved in different topics and put the diversity as personal priority. And this would be good in your message. Just to say that in Metronic, we have in different things, no? Policies, as I mentioned, program, but we achieved some numbers about, for example, we have equal pay for gender in United States, 100%, and at globally level, 90%. And I think that this is part of the policies that we are implementing to be more diverse in our team.
Thank you, Maria. Ricardo, what advice would you give a manager?
So I would answer this the following way. So I have two of my largest businesses are run by women, and I think it's worked out pretty well. Part of it's flexibility, part of it's knowing and trust. Some of the things you mentioned earlier, Randy. I think what Maria just said is very important. I think as a manager, like I'm thinking like what I've observed, what I have learned from others. And I remember distinctly being in a town hall with one of my bosses and in our division. It was a town hall for our division. There's maybe 10,000 people on the call. Or 10,000 people in the division. I don't know how many people on the call. And he made a comment like, and it just occurred to me now. And I asked him later, "Did you do this on purpose?" And he said yes. He came up and he was like in his, like literally he's giving a presentation about all these people. They're in ties and coats and others dress well, whatever. And he's like in his shirt and jeans and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go to my son's soccer game at his school in an hour. And I have to, and he pretended like he's just, like I didn't really prepare. He was really well prepared. And he gave a bunch of stats and numbers and then he left. And I think that was like a very visible way of saying, it's okay to be flexible. Look what I'm doing. And he didn't say it that. So he kind of did things in a way that were visible and showed it. And as part of this answer, I think by the fact that if you have the benefit of having women run large businesses for you, that in itself is giving an example, which is akin to the one I just gave about my manager, which is showing that there's different ways of doing things, and this is working, and this is really working well, and it's commercial, and it gives role models, and it's so you as a manager. I think what Maria said was really right. Is that you have to, you can't just, and I said this earlier, but you can't just be neutral. You have to go out of your way to promote flexibility, to use that word again, to ensure that I use the word retain, but not just retain, to attract people to your organization. And the way you do that is by having visible leaders that others come in and say, I want to be that person. I want to be just like her.
Absolutely. Role models are so important. Gabi, how about you? What advice?
Advice. Let me go with the mission of Microsoft. The mission of Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So our mission is by default deeply inclusive. We expect that, I mean, the organization expect that each of us, no matter the level we have, play an active role in creating environments where people that of different backgrounds are together and bringing the best of them for their best work. So said that, it could be not more aligned with my values, my values in life, being with Microsoft or being out of Microsoft. So maybe the advice for someone that it is in another reality, as a manager, my advice is let others be themselves because you like to be yourself. So let the others be themselves. And with that, you are winning also because your success is the success of each one of the persons that are in your team. That's it.
That's super advice. And I remember reading a psychobabble book. I studied psychology in college, full disclosure. And so I've gone back to reading this. And I read somewhere that we often pick on people's weaknesses as opposed to recognizing their strengths and really helping them to develop their strengths. So with that, Gabi, Maria, Ricardo, thank you very much. I apologize that Laura wasn't here. You were very inspiring, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And hopefully, we will continue to build stronger tables with equal numbers of men and women, and particularly in finance, medical technology, and technology. Thank you so much. You are really role models for everybody who's listened here today. Mil gracias. It's been fabulous.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much.
So with the disruptions of this past year, we have a real opportunity to make sure that the future of work is even more inclusive and diverse than ever before. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our second panel, The Next 10 Years, featuring Ted Acosta, America's Vice Chair, Regional Managing Partner, LATAM South at EY, Wanda Weigart, Chief Brand Officer at Globant, and our moderator, Richard Louis, anchor and journalist at MSNBC, NBC News. Again, we encourage you to be part of the conversation and tweet your questions using the hashtag WomenASCOA. Richard, it's wonderful to have you back with us again. We are thrilled. Over to you.
It is great to be back, and fantastic discussion there. Thank you so much. And while this might be the last discussion for today's program, we're going to really try to look forward. And I know Ted and Wanda, it's really fantastic to speak with both of you. It's a big question to ask, isn't it? The next 10 years. So I guess we should get straight to it, right? Answer the promise of what we're gathering here today. What is that answer, Wanda, would you say? What do the next 10 years bring us?
I am really positive about the outlook and how the next 10 years will look like. I think that there is a profound change going on in society. So probably society is pushing for changes broadly, and organizations, we are talking about these issues. We are talking about gender gap, and it's something that we have been discussing for a long time, but the last, I would say, 5 years, you can say that it has had a huge penetration in the whole society. So there is a lot of things to be done. Pandemic has brought more challenge into bringing the gender gap, but I do believe that that society is changing, and organizations and leaders are seeing the issue and are working towards that. And if we commit ourselves to focusing on the new generations and teaching young kids and young girls the opportunities, and I'm talking about the IT industry, right? Because I come from that industry, showing the IT industry, as you all know, there is every talent is scarce. Every company is looking for talent. So and I would say like 20% of the talent is women. So the opportunity is huge. If we teach and if we open the opportunities and show more girls how they can come into this industry, then gender gap will continue to shrink.
We're hoping. Ted, let's start with the big question, the next 10 years.
So I hope you can hear me okay, because I've been having a little bit of technology issues this afternoon. So can you hear me well?
Good.
Very well. Thank you for the thumbs up. I believe that the next 10 years will bring probably an accelerated improvement on gender parity, at least from what I see in my environment, which is professional services, and also in this region, which is LATAM South, the southern piece of Latin America, of South America. And that is because as much as we have suffered through the pandemic, personally and as a society, and also as businesses, a lot of obstacles have been I guess, revealed for what they are, which is just obstacles there to overcome, particularly obstacles that traditionally would have hurt women more. We've seen an environment that is very resilient, being flexible in terms of presence, in terms of work hours, in terms of balancing the personal and the professional obligations, particularly for women. And we've seen how it has worked very well at the end of the day. I mean, the businesses haven't, talking about large corporations, they haven't collapsed, they haven't shrunk. And in fact, they have accommodated all these chaotic circumstances and circumstances that may have been more chaotic for women before the pandemic and more difficult. I believe that those circumstances are now becoming much more manageable and normalized, if you will. And so I foresee a significant degree of advancement in terms of the playing field for women. Now, of course, a lot of actions have to occur, a lot of policies have to be adopted and deliberate thoughts, right? But I believe that that we have demystified and overcome a lot of the obstacles that have been there for forever, especially in professional services.
You know, one of the reflections I have from what you both said is when I was in South America, in Peru and Uruguay with Por Ser Niña, along with Plan International, they had a champions program where they would develop, and this is to your point, Wanda, about boys and girls, right? Both getting an understanding very early on that you do have and do need equity, and getting young boys earlier on in their life to understand that responsibility. I remember there was one student, his name was John, and he was 16, and he would wear this pink t-shirt, and he would have sessions after high school that would bring other fellow boys, and he would talk about, hey, you know, if I got my girlfriend pregnant, I look like a very, you know, masculine individual. She unfortunately does not. And this is the way he would start his sessions. And I think starting early, and if that's any indication of what the past 10 years have been, I mean, I agree with both of you. The next 10 years look very promising, but it still shows the gaps. And Wanda, one of the gaps that I wanted to reflect on that Ted was bringing up is I know that when we look at the data in North America, the women and girls were adversely affected economically during the pandemic. And that's just one of the groups that were facing a gap, and the pandemic really exposed them. What did you see in terms of that exposure during the pandemic? And what do you think we can do now that it's out in the light, if you will? More in the light, I should say.
Yeah, yes, definitely. It was a huge setback, the pandemic for women. Women were, you know, you mentioned the North America, but I think in Latin America happened the same and even more. Conditions are even worse here in generally in the society. So more women need to take care of their households, of their kids, you know, everything. But at the same time, now that we are like seeing the light outside the tunnel, and probably we are close and to start a post-pandemic era, there is a huge opportunity because organizations, you know, there is a huge opportunity in terms of digital transformation, in terms of how businesses are moving forward. Lots of new jobs are starting to be created because there is a positivism going on in the corporate level. So new jobs are going to start to be created. So I think that, and at the same time, there is a new philosophy. What Ted was mentioning in terms of balancing personal and professional life. Probably today's work is not going to be the same than others, than the before the pandemic work. So right. There will be more flexibility and more openness to welcome women and understand the particularities of their lives, of our lives. Yes, mine as well. I'm there as well.
Well, I mean,
yes, you are.
You know, the pandemic has been a great equalizer in that for probably for the first time for most men, you realize what it is to look after an entire household, especially in traditional families where the husband works outside and the wife either works part-time or doesn't work outside and looks after a household. And working in the house where everything is happening with the children, with the school, with the meals, it's not just something that the women have had to balance in the pandemic. The men have had to do the same thing. And then when you have a family where the men and the women both worked and they're taking turns on who watches the kids or who cooks the meals or who looks after their homework and helps them. It was also a great equalizer where I think many men have realized the need for a better balance with the distribution of chores in the house, the responsibility for the household and the children, but then also they've enjoyed the time with their families, and they probably want to keep a little bit of that. I asked my colleagues how great it was to have the kid, have lunch with the kids. Never happens, right? Or being at home for dinner, and the men don't want to give up that either. So I think this new way of working, if you wish, what we call it at UI, with a hybrid environment, an environment that's very flexible, I think will benefit not only families and the like, but it will also bring a certain parity in the household that I think will reflect in the workplace for women.
Wanda, I think you wanted to respond. I kind of got that energy coming through the screen.
I think that this is a change that will level up the gender, because we, as a society, the pandemic had its ups and downs, and the ups was spending more time with family. So I completely agree with what Ted was saying.
I want to ask a question. You can either look at this organizationally and or personally, and that is, what can women do to help close the gap? If you had one piece of advice, either to a fellow leader for another organization, or somebody that is close to you or is asking you this. So what can women do more, and what can men do more? Wanda?
Okay. I would say mentorship for sure. Talk to other women. And actually, I was very lucky myself, because I had the opportunity to have a very interesting and rewarding career. But I know that there are other women that don't have the same access than I did. So being there for them, showing alternatives to the issues that they have, that's one way. The other thing is putting light into other examples, giving visibility to other leaders, and helping them be shown and be known, because that would give more role models for other women that want to succeed in the professional business.
Perfect. Ted?
So I will speak from the experience that I have had in managing a lot of different people from different countries. One thing that has been very helpful to me as a male manager is to be educated by the women on the issues that women face. And over one's career, you tend to form a lot of opinions about workers and productivity and quality of work, etc. But you also have opinions on how you got there and the things that helped you and how you approach situations. And you realize that how you got there and how you approach situations is not the way that everybody gets there. It's not the way that everybody approaches situation, let alone if you then begin to look at factors that are much more profound, like gender or background or level of education or level of training. And so the best way to understand those points of view is to sit down with the women and ask them and provide forums for them to communicate this information and educate their managers. I have even seen women managers who, for whatever reason in their career path, don't completely understand all of what the women face as issues, whether it could be generational. It could be the fact that some women didn't have children, for example, and don't understand exactly where the women with children come from, or other types of circumstances. I think where the women have helped me the most, and I see them have an impact, is significant in advising advancing their experiences, that sharing the experiences, providing advice, etc. The second way in which I find them very helpful to the organization is in providing spaces where other women can come and ask questions, especially the younger women or the new women or women who have decided to change their careers, etc., so that they can resonate ideas, can have role models, if you will, if you like those terms, or have people who may see their experiences reflected in them. That to me has been really, really helpful. In terms of the men, I would like all of the male leaders that I have to deliberately think about whether they have enough women in their teams, whether the women are getting the experiences that the men are getting, whether you in any way, and consciously or not, are preventing women from advancing or are doing enough. And these are things that don't come necessarily naturally to people. You have to think about it. And so I instill that in the men to please think about, do you have enough women in your team? What are you doing to advance women? If you don't have enough women in your team, what might be the case? How can we help you? If you don't think women in your team are advancing enough, why is that? Are you providing enough opportunities? So it's more deliberate actions. In fact, it's deliberate actions on both camps.
One of the things I'm thinking of, Wanda and Ted, and what you said, is accessibility to the conversation. The doors have certainly been opened in the last 10 years in ways we've never seen before. When I'm talking about gender equity, when I'm talking about feminism, those words can sometimes be heavy laden in any organization, right? But I think the door is wider open now to begin the conversation in more heartfelt ways, at least the last 10 years, I believe. The next 10 years is when can we actually just talk about it and get it done without the recoil. In organizations, when I've spoken, for instance, in financial institutions about gender equity or feminism, it has not been the most comfortable, my friends. It has not been the most comfortable. And what we need to figure out, what are the accessible ways to get to the conversation, right? Because you can't just lay it on the table. Hey, we got a problem on gender equity, and all of a sudden the organization changes. We wish that could happen. It doesn't happen that way. You get a lot of recoil from men and women, like, oh, that's a little bit too sharp, right? Don't say it that way. And when we step in, let's just say that there's a conversation where gender sensitive language is not being used. How do we get into that so we can change the culture, right? So we can change the culture. Wanda, what is one of those steps you think help organizations to get closer, where it's not a recoil? Do you know what I mean? Because there's that recoil. Some people like, oh, I don't want to.
Well, I think that the management is key for that. Top management, I would say. I can talk from my personal experience at Globan. When we decided and we set our heads firmly towards changing this reality a couple of years ago. It was before the pandemic started, and what we did was set clear KPIs, and we didn't do like 5-10 KPIs that everyone would start like going around not knowing which one was the most important one. We only set one, actually two. One was to achieve 50-50 gender parity in management by 2025, which was like, imagine that, the IT industry, 80-20 is a reality. So getting to that number is huge. And we committed towards that. We're working, we are making progress year by year. And that has driven behavior in all the different areas, because everyone needs to work towards that. Management is involved in every area, and you have to start training people to get more people in the company, promote leadership, mentor women to advance in their careers. It triggers a lot of different and micro actions through the whole company. The second goal, sorry, I forgot about this, sorry. The second goal was to inspire 1,500 young girls to open the funnel, to broaden the funnel, you know, to have more young kids into the industry. So with those two KPIs, we are trying to change the reality in the midterm.
Yeah, supply and demand, right? Simple, good old-fashioned supply and demand. How about you, Ted?
I said 1,500, it's 15,000. Sorry.
I love this. We got to keep on talking. Next, it'll be 150,000.
Exactly. I agree with Wanda that the first point she made is one that is so important to us, which is the tone of the top. It starts with management. If management embraces it, then it's something you can more easily push down the organization, make it a part of the business. And that was not just an instruction to managers saying, you must worry about this. It is more about like everything that we do is the business case. And the fact is that the business case for gender parity is a no-brainer if you think about it. First of all, society continues to evolve. We have more and more women in leadership positions. They are our clients. They are in a professional services environment. And even if they're not telling us, and by the way, some of them do tell us that we don't have enough women in our team, we know that is important because, as it was said in one of the panels before, enterprises with more women are more creative, are more productive, are better, right? So we have a business case of becoming better. So we have an ingredient to how do we become better? How do we become more creative? How do we become more innovative? And also how do our clients see that and reward us and hire us, right? Because we have those elements. It's a perfect business case. So once you get the business leaders to embrace that, it's a lot easier to have it permeate throughout the organization. That it is a no-brainer. It's part of a very, very strong team. Then you go to the second piece, which is exactly what Wanda was talking about, which is the KPIs. Okay, that's the how. That no longer the why, right? Is the how and the what. Where do we want to get? And we set KPIs as well. EY, for example, in Latin South, my region, we're 54% women. You could think that that's a great thing to celebrate. I think it's great. But when we look at the upper echelons of our enterprise, the partnership level, we're still much below that. So what's happening to the women in between? So we look at that. What is the career path of women? How do we get them to become partners in the organization, and beyond that, how do we put them in leadership? Many times we do that by putting them in leadership positions and helping them to develop on the job. I think that presence of women in key positions also helps to demonstrate to the firm the importance of having a parity of the genders, a representation of the genders, make it a non-issue, if you will, at the end of the day. I mean, I happen to have been very lucky in my career where I worked with as many men bosses as women. So for me, when I was going up in my organization, I always saw men and women in similar leadership positions above me. So by the time I became a manager myself and people talked about gender parity, and it's like, what do you mean? There's no gender parity? Because in my experience, it was always that. But when I looked beneath the surface, I realized, no, it wasn't gender parity. And that is something we needed to do. And so, I think it's that combination of from the top, and as Wanda said, the KPIs.
And one of the aha moments for me is I was sitting on a panel during UNGA in New York, and it was about gender parity. And I learned from two other panelists what male privilege is. And you just described that tracking, Ted. You thought everything was cool, and then you realized, oh, hang on a second, there's a problem. you have privilege just because you were born a man. And this means you walk into a room, you never think of your gender. Wanda, I'm guessing you've been in many meetings where you're thinking, I'm the woman walking into this business meeting. Both of you speak to that idea of male privilege, because that is something, if there's something in the next 10 years we got to target on, is getting rid of male privilege. Wanda?
I agree, but I have to say that I also had to change my mind, because I started like 16 years ago at working at Global, and I was the only women leader at that time. Now, luckily, I'm not the only one. But for me, it wasn't something odd. It was natural, and actually, I didn't recognize that there was an issue. It took me. It was a change that I had to do, because in my career, in like going to education, in my family, I didn't experience any inequality. I have brothers, so for me it was my parents didn't do any they didn't put any difference between in our raising, so I didn't see that. It got me a lot of thinking and a lot of realization as I grew up, and as I saw other women and how they struggled, to embrace that cause and say, hey, we need to change that, and also talk with my peers and ask them also to share this reality.
Ted? Male privilege.
And so I agree, Richard. I enter a room and I never think about it. I never have, right? And I do know for a fact that many of the women that I work with feel differently, right? They have a different experience. Personally, I believe that the way we can change that is by having more and more women in different leadership roles and different positions, making them ubiquitous, if you will, so that we begin to create an environment where it's not an abnormality for those who are seeing the 1 or 2 women or 3 women or 5 women, and for the women themselves, that they don't feel that they are the odd duck, if you will, in the room. I mean, it's just a matter of accustoming the organization to having this constant fluid environment of diversity, right? Of different of women in different positions, of men in different positions, of men reporting to women, women reporting to men. I mean, it is remarkable to me that we can see still gender inequity, if you will, in numbers in countries in Latin America, when in fact, when you look at Brazil, Argentina, Chile, all have had women presidents. And so this is a big deal, right? We talk about Latin America, you always put them in a box, right? You say, oh, well, that's a macho society, it's male dominated, etc. You have these women who have risen to the top political positions in the countries. But then when you talk to certain other people, including women, they will say, well, that's an anomaly, or it's an exception. And so my challenge in my organization is, how do we not, I can't govern or fix politics, but certainly in the organizations, how do we make that not an exception? How do we make sure that it's not going to be an exception? It's going to be one time or one woman here and there. I think it's just a matter of sensitizing the women and helping the women get into these positions, putting women in the positions. And hopefully you will get to a generation where the women walking in the room never think about their gender, and the men that are seeing the women coming into the boardroom also never see a gender, just see a board member or a manager.
If you both could just raise your hand in answer to this, and then I'll follow up. Raise your hand if you're a feminist. What is a feminist, Wanda? And when's the last time you used that word, and what was the context?
The second part of the question, that's
right?
hard.
Yeah, I know.
For me, being a feminist is actually to work toward what we are discussing now, work towards gender parity, work towards getting the same opportunities and helping more women have the chance of developing similar to what men have. That is being a feminist for me. Actually, I can't remember when was the last. Probably it was in an internal meeting we have a D&Y pod, what we call pod team. Probably it was during one of those meetings, internal meetings.
And what was the reaction around? Because the reason why I asked that, Wanda, you know what I mean. It's sometimes when we bring up the word, it's also one of those big words. You know,
Yeah.
it's a big word. And what was the reaction in the context of that word use?
No, but the thing is that it's important to understand what it means in a specific context. And if you put feminist in a context of building this parity, of building these same opportunities, I don't think we have to take the negative connotation out of that word, and at
Yes.
the moment we are taking that as part of our conversation, so it's not an issue there.
Yeah, so true. It's when I would you know, I'd have like 1,000 folks in a room, and I'd say, all the guys who's a feminist, raise your hand. It was always sort of, you know, these are all business people. You know, it's like you know, like it's maybe you know. Wait, okay? He raised his hand. Okay, my hands. It happens all the time. Ted, tell me, what does it mean to be a feminist? And number two, when's the last time you used it? And what was that reaction when you were using it?
So I would consider myself a feminist in that I will take actions. I continue to take actions in furtherance of helping women advance in their careers, in their places in society. I try to do it through my work in my firm, by making sure that not only they have equal opportunities, but many of times they have more than equal opportunities, because I think that treating everyone the same way doesn't help everybody, especially those who are disadvantaged, right? They need extra. And that to me is extremely important, and I make no apologies about it. In that way, I consider myself a feminist. Don't believe I've ever used the term, so I believe that I'm just coming out to all of you here and they say I am a feminist. But I have made my feminist views known very often. And in fact, I would say even this last week, when we were organizing an event in my firm, and just not like this event, but about business, and I received the script, and I'm not talking to the organizer, and I said, well, wait a minute. There's only one woman in this panel we're putting together, this program, and why is that? Right? So,
yeah, otherwise known as a manel. It's otherwise called a manel, is what they're called.
Right? And you know, I can't say that any of the people organizing our events don't care. Of course, and in fact, many of the people behind it are women themselves, and so it's a form of wiring, if you will. And I'm trying to do just that, to wire our organization, and maybe until it's no longer necessary, so that we think about it. And that's my way of doing, just, you know, a little example. But in others, you know, even in our, we're currently planning a return to the office, in return to the workplace, which is happening everywhere. And going back to one of the things we were talking about before, flexibility, is how do we ensure that our women professionals are now thinking, okay, well, on this day, we're going to reopen the UI offices. I'm going to be disadvantaged because I now have this way of working and living for the last 20 months, and it's all going to go to, you know, to waste. And in my, I'm going to have to choose between my family or my kids or my free time and my profession. And so we deliberately thinking about that, because these are not issues that affect men the same way. I mean, he's talking about women who are also mothers and taking caretakers, etc.
Yeah, for me, being a feminist means I'm a 7-year-old feminist. I'm about this tall, and I'm learning. And so, Ted, thank you for coming out today. You were born today on October 21st. You are now a feminist. Now begins the clock. And so it's okay to make mistakes. That's really essential, I think, for men and boys as they learn that, is you're not automatically in, right? You're not automatically knowing everything. You're not automatically doing the right thing. It takes time. And so for me, when I talk about feminism, it's like I'm a 7-year-old feminist. I am learning and I'm trying my best. I get it wrong. I could be on air talking to a guest, and during the break I go, oh, what did you just do? But then I give the space to forgive myself, because we're not going to be perfect, right? And I think that's really important for accessibility to the conversation of gender equity in organizations. It's really important because it's not a 1 or 0. It's just a little bit of accessibility. You move along, you make it more acceptable, and then you can talk more. Quickly, do you have a chief inclusion officer that reports to the CEO? And if you do, how does that work? And how's it helped? How do you think it'll help the next 10 years in business and organizations? And if you don't, do you think that's what's needed in every organization in the next 10 years? I'll start with you, Ted, this time.
So we do have a chief inclusion officer that reports to the CEO, and then we replicate that model in the different organizational units we have, so that there is continuity of that proximity, if you will, to the chief executive officer of each one of our units. And I believe it's essential, because to the point of view we're making about thinking about it, and I was talking about wiring it to the organization, we can't expect all these things to come up naturally and to happen naturally. They have to be the result of deliberate effort, plan efforts, and mistakes will be made, especially when you put these kinds of initiatives in the hands of people who don't know how to run these initiatives. And you need, just like for everything else, like technology and legal and benefits, you need a person who understands the latest developments in diversity and inclusion and equity, who understands and can even critique how the other sides of the things that you might say or you might do, right? So these people are, I believe, that kind of specialization helps the organization avoid mistakes, and helps the organization spend the time and the effort on those more proven techniques or more proven initiatives. So I think that's extremely important. Right? I'm a big fan of these positions. Now, over the next 10 years, I mean, we have our work cut out. I mean, we still don't have parity, certainly globally, in all aspects of societies. I view entities like EY, much like I'm sure Wanda looks at Global, as we are agents of change. We are actually helping to move society. And with our advanced programs, with our cutting edge ideas, I think we are going to help society go even faster. But we have a lot of territory to cover. I mean, remember that in addition to gender parity, we have other issues to worry about. We have social inequity. We have racial issues also in all countries, including in Latin America, that we have to overcome. We have LGBTQ. I mean, we have a lot of things that we want our organization to change and society to change, and it will take time. But I feel comfortable that with these kinds of mechanisms, these kinds of organizations, these kinds of officers, like you mentioned, we will advance. I believe very firmly that we will.
Wanda, Chief Inclusion Officer?
We have something interesting at Globant. Our Chief Operating Officer, Patricia Pomies, she not only handles operations, her role is completely trying to do the synergies between operations and people. And Be Kind, we have a Be Kind initiative which handles all our D&I initiatives. And her role, she reports to the CEO, is to make sure that the business is completely aligned to the D&I initiative. It's not like a separate area that has to build in afterwards into the business. It's completely, it is built from the roots of the organization. And this Be Kind initiative is led by her, and I'm also included in the leadership in the steering committee, because we want to promote it outside as we communicate our strategy towards the outside. But the most interesting part is how we structure and how we conceive our business. It's part of one same strategy.
Hey, Wanda, guess what? I just heard from the board. They said they will fund anything you want to do in Globan related to gender equity. I just talked to the chair. The chair says, Wanda, you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
What I just got the call when you guys were talking. When the two of you were talking. What would you do with that if you heard that from the board? They said, Wanda, anything you want, so long as it's addressing the issue of gender equity.
Education. For me, the answer is clear and simple. It's education. It provides scholarships for women to be trained in STEM and to enter and to seize the opportunity that it's out there. It's so big and so it's unbelievable that we have this huge opportunity and we cannot take advantage of it. So it's definitely going to be education and open the funnel of talent.
Is there anything, because I just heard from the genie too. The genie just called me and says you have a wish and it could happen instantly right now. What would that wish do to your organization or to societies that Globan operates in? So it could happen like right now, like that change that will help. So the education is the long play, right?
Right.
Everybody's calling me, Wanda. Everybody wants to give you stuff right now.
I will call. I will be closer to you. I want these wishes to happen. Oh my gosh! I think that I would say I would love for the leading women of my team to be able to have the opportunity to speak for themselves in these types of events and get them and make them available so that they can spread the word of their stories. They're amazing stories. We have one initiative going on right now, the Women That Build Awards. We want to give awards to those women leading the change. The stories that you hear there, they are amazing. So being able to promote those stories would be incredible.
Yeah, those are great. The genie says great stuff, by the way, and so does the board chair. Hey, Ted, guess what? I also heard from the board chair and the genie at the same time. They got together and said you only get one. So so Wanda gets two. You only get one. So what are you going to do?
What my wish would be for something similar to Wanda. I think is a substantial budget to invest in the development of women, whether they are in our organization or that could eventually join our organization. We are becoming significantly a technology professional services company. And we want to get more and more women with a STEM background, and we are getting a fair share, if you will. But I still believe that there are visible and invisible barriers for women to choose careers in STEM. My sub wish to this genie, so if I can do this, is in two parts.
Let me say. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I can do that is to have a source of inspiration for many young girls out there to select careers that they think are not for them because they have traditionally been for men. I think that we see this when we look at women who come to our organization with very good backgrounds and the circuitous way in which they found themselves ultimately there, which could have been a lot more direct if they had been told, you can be a math genius, you can be computer programming, you can be anything in this area, and don't think of those as boy careers or boy things. I think that's where it's nascent significantly. If I could change that, Richard, it's nothing to do with my firm, it's nothing to do with hiring. I mean, we could change a lot of society. If we could just eliminate these biases and even preconceptions that exist, especially with not just the young girls, but those around them who are actually sometimes not helping.
Thank you both for that. The genie and myself get along really well. In fact, the genie has offered other wishes. When I was in Latin America for Por Ser Niña, and I would ask 12 and 13 and 14-year-old girls that very same question. I would say, you got the wish. What would you do? I thought Ava did the best when she said, Richard, I would create a machine and men and boys walk through this machine. And once they walk through it, they would lose all of their machistic ideas and stereotypes about women, but they just, all they have to do is walk through the machine, like at the airport. That's what she wanted to do with her one wish. And I said, that has got to be the most creative. The two of you are quite good as well, but I think Ava's idea was pretty cool, right?
Definitely.
Just a machine. You just walk straight through. Hey, let's finish with this. I know that you both said the next 10 years look really great from your perspective, and you're very positive about it. Let's finish where we started. What really jazzes you about the next 10 years when we are thinking about conversations like ASCOA's Women's Hemispheric Network gathers and does so often? What do you think is going to be different when we meet again in 10 years? What's the hope that drives you forward in this? Wanda, why don't you go first?
Well, I hope that we are achieving our goals, that we are seeing results in a more tangible way, and that we have gone from talking to showing concrete changes. That's my hope. We are all optimistic, as you say, but it requires a lot of hard work, and it requires, I am really glad for this panel because it shows, what EY is doing and what other organizations are doing. It shows that there is a huge commitment in different parts of the world, not just organizations, NGOs. There are a lot of factors involved, governments. There are a lot of factors involved in trying to make this change happen. I would say that it's a matter of seeing what happened.
Yeah. When you were saying that, Wanda, one thing that popped into my brain, I work at MSNBC and NBC News in New York at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. And there are 3 big networks in the United States, ABC, CBS, and NBC. They have never been run by women. In the last year, we now have 2 presidents, one leading ABC and one leading MSNBC, that are women. Things are changing, and even the corners that we've not seen before. And that is within itself very hopeful for me because, imagine the number of decades that we've never seen women leading. And that I know is across the world, but that's another example of progress. Ted, next 10 years, what makes you hopeful?
Yeah, I believe that we will get to gender parity, at least in my organization, but very likely in many other areas of society and corporate world and government, because it is such an unavoidable conclusion to this imperative. And of course, anything can happen. Right? We could have other kinds of catastrophes, other kinds of intervening factors. But even the pandemic, I think, will be an accelerator, as I said at the start. In my organization, we have 3 different geographic areas: Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and Asia Pacific. 2 of those, Americas in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is 80% of our organization, are run by women. In my organization, which is 5 countries, we have 2 of those countries are run by women country managing partners. So I feel like we are well into that journey, but obviously we've got a lot of ground to cover. But this progress that I just described only happened in the last 5 years. So if I'm looking at 10 years, at the speed with which we're going, with the level of intent that we have to address gender parity in my organization, we will certainly be at a point where we can say we've got the numbers. Now, we've got the women in the positions of power, position of leadership, position of influence, position of inspiration. Whether the rest of society will be there, it would be my great hope that we will be looking around and not just one organization like Global or EY or 2 others or your former organizations, but many more organizations. And we will see that also in NGOs, we'll see that in government, etc. It is my hope that this will be an unavoidable juggernaut of positivity towards gender parity.
All right. Group hug, Wanda. Ted, thank you so much. Wanda Weigert, it really enjoyed our conversation today. Ted Acosta, thank you as well. Thank you for bringing it. Thank you for raising your hands when you needed to. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Guess who's back? It's Randy. Hey, Randy, we had quite a session there. We had the genie show up. We had the board call, with the board chair calling in. You know, we also had somebody. Should we sing happy birthday? We have a new feminist in the family now.
Absolutely.
All of maybe 30 minutes old now.
Thank you so much, Richard. Your moderating was fabulous as usual. And thank you to Wanda and to Ted. And we really end this session and we end the day on a very high note. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
I also want to thank our other panelists and the industry leaders who led our WHN workshops yesterday. Susie Tonin from American Tower, Agustina Alberto from Globant, Sarah Kemp from Organon, and Silvia Varela, Peter Overhow, Josefina Flores, Barbara Furtado, and Alejandra Herrera Vargas from AstraZeneca. Recordings of those conversations on the gender data gap, building a successful career in STEM, knowing yourself, and maintaining company culture during COVID will be available for on-demand viewing on our website in the coming days, as will this program. We thank all of you for tuning in. We hope to see you again soon, and we hope to see you in person. Thank you again. Muchas gracias. Obrigada. Take care.